Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
Hey Ryan, how's it going?
Very good and you. It's been a very chaotic week, but we're getting there. My wife started her new job, and I've been doing the parenting, working all at once thing, which I'll admit, when you're in South Africa, you don't realize how much time it takes. But it was a tough day yesterday. Better today, but
Oh no,
how are things with you?
good. Yeah, that sounds exciting, but also like a lot to balance.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's fine. Like with one, since my daughter, I take her in the morning to crash, and she does the morning there. Then I bring her home, have lunch with her, put her to sleep, etc. But my son was sent home this morning because he was sick, so that's made an extra dimension. So if I do need to run, that's why I need to run.
Fair enough.
So anything you want to cover today?
Yeah, well, we could talk about the Metaverse, or we could talk about the rethinking workplace flexibility. Either of those two links you sent over, I could chat about today.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Metaverse, and let's get your thoughts on what I sent across.
Sure, yeah. So you had sent an article, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Metaverse, which was kind of, a fun play in all things Metaverse, organized like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but in this case, the Guide to the Metaverse. So I thought, one, it was an entertaining way to present it, a new way to talk about all things Metaverse. Yeah, I don't know if there's much, like any new, I don't know. What did you get from that?
I think it's good. There were a couple of things. I think in some respects it's closer than we think, and there's a lot of activity in parallel to the physical world we live in. So there's a lot. I mean, if you look at the amount of headlines that are popping up or article headings around people buying property in the Metaverse, or there was a mortgage that someone got to go and buy something ridiculously expensive. And when I say ridiculously expensive, there were hundreds of thousands of pounds for a digital house. You can buy yachts and all that kind of stuff, also for ridiculous amounts of money. And when you start seeing that sort of thing happening, you wonder, should you get involved in this stuff? I mean, at least that's what I was thinking about. And I've spoken to a few people, and they've given me some pointers where to go look. And in some weird way, I think there will be people that it'll create demand, and they will be interested in it. But in another weird way, I think it'll be shunned. And this is almost back to the original social media things, like picking your Facebook versus whatever else was at that time. MySpace, I think, was one. People will get religious about it, and then push it out. The other thing that I've seen, which is something we have discussed before, is in this article they discuss Facebook and their meta approach and how they're struggling to find relevance as a company. They're losing users all the time, and they need to find something else to do. And this is, one of the options. But it's one of those things. I don't think anyone has an absolute answer. Will it fail? Will it be successful? We won't know until time has progressed. But I just found it interesting that it keeps returning to feeds And I've heard in a few different episodes of different podcasts how people are talking more and more about how they wish they could just go into a meeting virtually to talk to someone, which is probably where this will start. Will become a practical business tool to do in-person meetings because not everyone wants to travel for whatever reason. Not just about not traveling, but personal reasons. It keeps them, homeward bound, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, I think one thing that would be a turning point for me when it comes to the metaverse, and something that I think felt more talked about when the metaverse hype first started, but the idea that no one company owns the metaverse. And as part of that, because obviously, and this article points out, we have versions of what could be construed as a metaverse today, from what Meta is doing with their VR work to and those early meeting experiences to video game metaverses, whether that's Minecraft, Second Life. Some of these things have been around for decades, but what doesn't exist yet is really integrations between different metaverses, like the idea that sure, no one company owns the metaverse, but you could flow from one place to another. And I think the article mentioned something about digital, metaverse currencies and like exchange of those, bucks into something else. So there's like the early bit of that integration piece, but until you can really, leave one metaverse, enter another, or like, you're not leaving anything, I guess, until it's more seamless. I don't know. I think that's just a milestone, and I wonder how far we are.
But it's a good point. It's the same as if you look at the cryptocurrencies. There won't be one exchange. There won't be one coin to rule them all. As much as everyone thinks Bitcoin is the only coin that'll survive. I say everyone. There's people that say that. The reality is you need multiple ones, and it comes down to integrations, which I think you've hit on a very good point. Is regardless of who builds this or operates this, there's going to be multiple vendors providing something, and the one that gets it right is the one that's the most open, connected to the other ones. And that's potentially where someone like Meta, as Facebook, may be in a better position than the other ones because they don't have to put their stall out with their own hardware and all the rest of it. But then you look at the likes of Apple, who seem to be very good at owning the niche. So they may be still the dark horse to watch. And then Microsoft, of course, with most desktops out there, and the gaming platforms that they're buying, may actually become the one that leads the successful implementation, but they won't be the first one.
Yeah, I can see that. What do you think about the idea of whether you should have to be your real self in the metaverse? Because this is something that came up in the article as well. And obviously we've seen a lot of social media platforms. And I think even with, the whole Elon buying Twitter thing, this is one of the early ideas for reforming Twitter that he put out, that you need to basically be, prove that you're yourself and present yourself as who you are. So you're not some, anonymous profile essentially. But I think there's also reasons in terms of like what the metaverse does kind of is give you, and this is the idea behind Second Life, like the ability to explore different parts of yourself or not be, tied to your real identity, right? So I think that's another just interesting, where will that land in different spheres in terms of, do you have to present yourself as, yourself so that you're, accountable for your actions, or can you be this avatar, this non-real person?
So I think you asked a couple of things there. I think authenticity is important. Who you are, and that's where I think the crypto underlying infrastructure will become important. Will be interesting to see how that's applied. But I think one of the benefits of the digital realm is you could be someone else. So I think in the right areas for the right reasons, you should be allowed to pretend to be someone else. Almost take that gaming profile that you've, fix all your weaknesses and do adventures and all the rest of it. And I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think when it comes to your professional identity or your natural person identity, that's got to be you, as close as it can be to you.
Oh yeah, definitely for like the anything in the professional side of things. It's like you wouldn't go on LinkedIn and like your LinkedIn name, your Call of Duty username or whatever. That would be very bizarre.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a few movies where this is, you think of, what was that movie with Bruce Willis? When they were machines, but people would live their lives out connected. I can't remember what it's called now. But he was like a police officer, but his body was synthetics. I think it was called synthetics. Where his body was robotic, and the consciousness was living in the metaverse, and the bodies were actually plugged in at home, and he would be in his robotic body moving around doing his job, but his actual body hadn't left the chair in 6 years. And then there was Altered Carbon, I think, which was on Netflix, which was you had your consciousness on a disc, a sleeve, and then you'd get a body to use until you died. And then when you died, as long as you died in the right places, your body would be moved on that sleeve to another body. And I wonder if that's our future in some respects. That's your immortality.
That is interesting. I mean, there's Avatar, The Matrix. Those are a bit more fantastical, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's like the moving into dystopian, like scary realm of all this stuff is like changing the fabric of society, or the the meaning of life, I suppose, if you could just be immortal. Yeah.
I think it's good exercise to go through. I mean, if you look at the pandemic, no one saw it coming, and then we had it, and then no one was prepared for it. I mean, anyone who says they were prepared for it, I wouldn't believe. But you've almost got to think about some of these things to know if you're okay with it, if it does happen. And it's a thought exercise more than a practical exercise. I was actually watching something yesterday where a guy was saying you need to cancel all your game profiles, you need to get out of all these things because this is warping your brain. And I thought about what he was saying. I thought, well, yeah, I could see why you would want to learn how to control that or limit your exposure to it. But you can't cut it out completely because you're actually losing a life skill in the future, because there are people, and if you think about, definitely younger generations than us coming through, where are they going to look for information? They're going to look on TikTok and those sorts of places. They're not going to come to Facebook and LinkedIn and those things, because they've grown up in a completely different world to what we've grown up in, and we've been a part of that evolution in some respects. So I think you got to keep the skills there, but you got to have the discipline that goes with it.
Yeah, that is interesting. If gaming skills are useful in the world of the future, I'm kind of not well positioned there, unless it's like Animal Crossing. I've got that one down. Another thing that I thought was interesting or new about the metaverse that I hadn't heard is just talking about the origin of some of it. And I guess people are even saying that, tracing it back to the World Fair, the idea of coming together and sharing these inventions, innovations, like the, technology of the time together was like an early version of the metaverse, which I thought was interesting because obviously that's not digital at all. But I can see how like the exchange of new ideas in that way is kind of a parallel to what we're talking about today with the metaverse.
Well, it is about exchange of information to a large extent. And I think that's the important piece is making that easy. There are definitely days where I'd much rather be virtually at a meeting than in the meeting, for whatever reason. And I think if we can make that easier, then that will definitely improve things. Because I think that article mentioned that they think that the first thought of this goes back to 1851 here in London, I think.
Yeah, that was that World Fair. And then, all the sci-fi kind of books where these ideas have been explored since then. So, it's definitely, even with the video game applications of this, it's not a new idea. It's almost like artificial intelligence is that in that way. It's like something we've been exploring and talking about for many, many decades, but it's, when's the tipping point where it becomes like a standard, just part of things, or where it really takes over our lives. And I think with, facial recognition, image recognition, some of the AI stuff has, again, like within the, past decade become more and more real and more relevant to, our everyday lives.
So here's a question for you. Do you think that the technology developed so we could have the sphere, or do you think we had to have the idea so that technology developed in that way? So which came chicken and egg in some respects? If we conceived that this is what we wanted to do 100 years ago, or however many 150 years ago, that we wanted to do metaverse, did that create the trajectory for technology to evolve for us to have now be in the roots of the metaverse? Because I think you could technically say you have it because you had get an Oculus or something like that, plug it on, and if everyone's on it and you're standing next to each other in a meeting room virtually, you're kind of there. Or do you think that as the technology's developed and it's gone the different routes it was going to go, the metaverse has become a thing because now we're connecting the dots?
It's a really interesting question. I think my instinct is that it's the exploration of these ideas, and that, there's something to this virtual existing in this other realm that appeals to us on some level, and that's why or it scares us on some level. We feel some sort of way about it, and that's why it has proliferated culturally in all of these different movies and books and what have you. But I also think when it comes to VR and some of these, augmented reality, mixed reality, that some of these technologies have been searching for a real problem to solve and a way to become embedded more in a more mainstream way for a long time. So I can see, obviously technology companies have a great interest in succeeding in new realms. So there's definitely that, economic or, need to apply the technology. That's also kind of a forcing function when it comes to companies like Meta.
I do need to wrap up. But it is an interesting thing because I think the pandemic in some respects has accelerated this to the forefront. I mentioned a book about this before called Shift. And I was looking at that the other day. That was written in 2010, I think, 2012. And a lot of what was in that book is what you're seeing now. So I'm interested to see how quickly it does come to the fore. Would be if we talked about this in a year's time, would we actually be doing this on headsets or glasses or whatever the technology provides, or is it sort of 3 years from now? That's the thing I'm sort of tracking, anecdotally.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Cool. Thanks, Heather. I've got to run, but it was good to catch up.
Yeah. All right. Have a good rest of your day, Ryan.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.